Welcome into the Aftershock. Going to be a little bit different. We were planning a bit of a bigger show, and unfortunately, a couple host issues more toward the last second. But let's get started. Alex, how you doing? We had the chance to talk with Luchi Gonzalez and Chris Leach, and then got some extra time for the patrons with Luchi Gonzalez, a video that we put up today for anyone who didn't quite catch it. Maybe tonight we'll consider this a part one, and we'll try to grab the others maybe next week and try to do a part two with a little bit more input. But start us off. What were your kind of impressions from this kind of impromptu almost press conference from Chris Leach and Luchi Gonzalez for kind of an end of season update?
Well, it's good to be here with you, Jamin. First of all, I was expecting this to be the full season-ending show, but we keep getting news. The season isn't over. We can't have our big season wrap show because they keep sending more news our way. We were able to speak with Chris and Luchi midweek. We had a big press conference with them, and then another separate follow-up conversation. Robert spoke to Luchi Gonzalez for about 20 minutes, and that is available now to all of our Quakes Epicenter patrons. So if you need a reason to subscribe to the Quakes Epicenter Patreon, this is as good a reason as any. 20 minutes with Luchi Gonzalez. We got to dig in on some juicy topics and then have some fun with him as well towards the end. So if you're curious about knowing who his favorite Halloween costume was this year, that's in the interview.
And what his Halloween costume was. He
and what his Halloween costume was.
And his wife.
And his wife. They went as a couple. That's right. It was let's say it was an upgrade over this usual touchline attire. It was,
there you go.
It was more formal than the functional tracksuits he wears on the touchline. But I will say it was not an impromptu press conference, Jamin. You made it seem like it was out of the blue. I was knocking on the door asking for these press conferences for quite some time. So glad that Chris and Luchi were willing to speak with us. It was really the first time we got to speak with Chris Leach since I think the Matthew Hoppe signing, or even since the Io Akinola signing. So we hadn't got to talk with him about the Cade Cowell signing. I was pressing him on that. Which, he did not
gave you an update. We'll talk about that.
And we got to speak with him kind of about his strategy heading into this offseason. We obviously get to speak with Luchi, fairly frequently throughout the season, but it was also good to hear his kind of big picture takes and get answers to some of the higher level questions that we had started, that dialogue that we had started at the beginning of the season with him about the overall trajectory of the club. And I think, Jamin, I guess the place to start is that it's positive. Both of them, I think that the takeaway was that it was a successful season and they were still disappointed. I think it was a success and disappointment was kind of where they left us. That was your takeaway as well, I assume.
I would say so. I would say that, again, the bar was kind of set low in saying that they're going to make the playoffs. And I don't recall if we knew the format or we didn't at the time that Luchi had made that prediction. I feel like had the bar been set at like 7 or 8, the team would have been more aggressive in certain decisions in the last few games down the stretch. They would have played in a different way. So I know it's easy to get kind of hung up in that finishing position of 9th, but I think if the position had been 8th, if it had been 7th, I think we would have seen kind of a bit more risk, a stronger push. So Satish is saying, barely a passing grade for Luchi in his first season. I'm going to say passing, but like C, right? Like I feel like he passes because he met what he said he would meet, but now, of course, we should expect that the stakes should be raised. Although he had kind of a comment about that for us when we met with him with Quakes Epicenter as well in terms of those expectations.
Jim, I feel like there's some generational divide here. And before we go into kind of all our ratings for the season, I feel like we need to clarify what we mean by these C's and A's and B's, because in my generation with what they call grade inflation, getting a C on the scorecard is a severe cause of concern and reason for panic here. So for me, I'll say passing grade. I'll give it a solid B. for the season. You know, you've kind of achieved what they set out to do, but you didn't really impress anybody or show anybody something that they weren't expecting. And that's the most that I'm probably going to give them. I was excited. I wasn't the only one, Jamin, who was getting feisty in the press conference as well. Jamin, I think you asked Lucci a question that was pressing him on those last few games of the season and whether or not they could have been more aggressive. I mean, I think that the answer is yes. And I think I don't know, did you feel satisfied with the way that he acknowledged that, or did you feel that he left some wiggle room there?
Oh, I feel like he gave us the answer he's going to publicly give. I think behind closed doors, there's going to be a different set of, answers, a different set of conversations than what they're going to talk publicly. I think setting the bar at playoffs, they're going to say, check, we hit that particular bar. And now it's going to need to be, and what Lucci described it as is kind of an ongoing process. And the way that he wanted to evolve was to get better in certain aspects of the game. And if we do those things, we should improve. Now, how much do we improve? Well, he kind of indicated that he's expecting some improvement, but he doesn't think like they're going to make necessarily leaps next year. But he said, but if by putting in the right process, we may see, that leap happen. But first, he wants to focus on process. And I think the reason for that is because they're trying to build something sustainable and not like a one and done, type situation where the Quakes I don't know, get fourth one season, then all of a sudden the next season they're out of the playoffs. It feels to me like there's a plan for like a 3-year improvement process that they've got in place here.
Well, first of all, there's two things I want to address here. First of all, I want to thank Brian because I think Brian is right here in the comments. First season is pass fail. Giving grades feels a little bit arbitrary either way. And he passed. I think Brian's right here. It wasn't spectacular overachievement, but he took it pass fail first season and he achieved that. The other thing I'll say is that I understand that there's increasing professionalization in soccer, and every club wants to talk about building a sustainable model, which isn't dependent on any given coach or any given technical director or any given president. On the other hand, I don't know if can you give examples where that's worked really well, Jamin? Because I feel like depending on who the coach is it's still very much like 3-year cycles. I don't know if the Quakes are ever going to get to the point where they are going to, be consistently performing regardless of who the coach is. You can't just take the coach out of the equation here. I feel like they should be planning for a 3-year cycle here with Lucci Gonzalez and trying to achieve the max they can achieve, and then acknowledge that after 3 years, maybe after 4 years, if he's particularly successful, you reset, you clean slate, and you start over with a new philosophy. I don't buy the argument that it's some grand 10-year plan, because I feel like that just allows them to kick the can down the road. And they've been doing that for a long time now by saying, oh, we're thinking long-term. We're being smarter than everyone else. We're being big picture here. When in reality, they're just being slow and they're not keeping up to pace with everyone else. So that's my concern here. I would rather see them go all out next season and all out a third season and be a little over-ambitious given the historical failures that they've had, then try to continue hedging and couching everything in this kind of like corporate like mumbo jumbo. Does that make sense to you?
It makes sense. I don't think it's a 10-year plan. I think we are looking at a 3-year plan. Year one was fix the defense, put the structure in. Year two is going to be now add some additional attacking punch, get the goals back. And we heard it from Chris Leach. They were disappointed in the goals output and they would like to get back. And I don't know that he gave a number, but let's just say if they got back to 50 goals and they only gave up 45, they would be a +5 on the goal differential side. By the way, Alex, if you're seeing good comments, feel free to just start popping some up.
Well, I was just seeing people agreeing with me, so I can toss those out.
Yeah, people agree with Alex. That's great. No, I don't think it's a 10-year plan, but I do think it's a 3-year plan. I also think that there's going to be an evolution and not a revolution in the roster. And one of the reasons for that is there's actually very few like hard contract terminations coming up outside of the loans, which Matthew Hoppy's loan ends, at the end of this season. I believe Jack Scahan's final option, or Jack Scahan, I trying to say that correctly. Jack Scahan's final option is also coming up, so he would need a new contract. I think Paul Marie is at the end of his, but I've heard that either one's in the works or it's actually been done. I've kind of heard a couple different things there, so I'm not sure which is actually more current and recent. But you got the big one hanging over you, which is Rodriguez. We did learn. My first question to Chris Leach was about the Rodriguez situation, and basically trying to find out, hey, are you guys going to try to pick up this loan, and turn it into a permanent transfer? How much is that transfer fee? Is it going to put him up into the DP range, which was kind of my fear? And the answer from Chris Leach was a resounding no. It will not put him in the DP range. After I pushed him a second time, he gave us a flat answer on that, which is good. Now we know that, more than likely Rodriguez, if they execute that, would stay in the TAM range. And I think that's fine. I think as the best defensive player outside of Danielle on this team, I think it's perfectly fine to have him up in that TAM range. And I, fully support trying to bring him back next season. So obviously that's a piece of business they need to get done, which will take some of the budget, and then hopefully a lot of it's going to attacking after that.
I don't think he confirmed it, but I think the way that Leach was talking,
I pressed him and I said, are you unable to say the level if you executed it? And he said he would not be a DP.
Yes, no. I know that part is true, but the question I was referring to, the bigger picture question, is whether they commit and bring him back. And he wasn't willing to confirm that. He did not. But I think that the way he was talking made it very clear that was his intention. I think he was willing to confirm that they were wanting to consider doing that. So he was willing to get very close, I think, to making that commitment. I assume it's just a kind of matter of agreeing personal terms with him.
Still reminding everyone, Patreon, if you're not on the Patreon, get on the Patreon. And the reason for that is because we do have this exclusive postseason interview with Lucci. We're describing it a bit, but you're going to want to hear it yourself because we're not going to talk about everything. We're not going to give away all the answers that we talked about because, we dug in a little bit on a couple topics, but we also had some fun questions. You're going to want to hear the answer to those fun questions too.
I couldn't do them justice. Lucci Gonzalez has mastered the kind of Greg Berhalter vocabulary here. He studied the Greg Berhalter School of Soccer Tactics, and he knows how to speak the speak. I don't know how to.
I think he knew how to speak the speak before Greg, though.
What's that?
I think he knew how to speak the speak before Greg, though. I think that's the way he's kind of always talked, and then him and Greg found some common ground, and he maybe learned a few new.
I mean, he credits
things to say or whatever the
credits
case is,
Greg fairly often. He says whenever he says any fun kind of soccer vocabulary or new concept, he goes, and I learned this somewhere. I learned this with Greg. He gives Greg a lot of credit for his coaching kind of.
Yeah, chops. For those of you who do not like Greg Berhalter, I'm sure you're going to have a lot of problems if Lucci can't push this team up much higher in the standings next season, because he definitely gives a lot of credit to Greg for changing his perspective on a few things. Specifically, I would say the two things that seems to have the biggest impact is the way that Greg prepares for matches and the way that he kind of makes sure that every person understands their role. Those two things, those things they're definitely similar on. Or he's picked up from Greg. And the other thing that he gives him credit for is kind of teaching him how to put in the defensive structure, because he wasn't a great defensive coach and FC Dallas wasn't a great defensive team. They were middle of the road, back when he was at FC Dallas. And the second and third years, things got worse as players went out, including Garezzo, and went out of the team. And they didn't do a good job replacing. So those are the two things that he does seem to give a lot of credit. He talks about the line breaking passes and things. And he probably picked that up from Greg as well. There was a question about a contract. Let me just try to see if I can find that and get the answer right. By the way, if you have questions, put them in the chat. We will try our best to answer as many of them tonight as possible and interact with you. Let's see.
I think given our conversation with Chris, Jamin, maybe we jump into the contract questions here and the roster building elements here, and we start with that as opposed to some
Nathan.
of the,
that's what it was. Any idea if
breakdown?
Yeah, so this is the one I was looking for. Any idea if Nathan is staying? And what we believe is true about Nathan is that he is got a contract through 2023 with an option for 2024. So believe they can pick up that option and they can keep Nathan next year. That's something that we'll find out when the team makes the end of season roster decisions. And the deadline date for, I believe, those roster decisions, Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was December 1st. I'm not looking at the list right now, but I think that's right.
So the thing I'll say here is that I think you actually have to consider kind of the internal roster dynamics a little bit more than maybe you usually would, because Danielle, Rodriguez, Nathan, and Judson are all quite close. And, they're the 4 Brazilians on the squad. I think they're all native Portuguese speakers. They are personally very good friends, and I think really have helped support each other here in San Jose. And Danielle has talked about this. They posted on social media about this, how that is a really tight-knit group within the squad. And I don't know if Danielle would have had as much success this season if there had been no other Brazilian players on the team, if he hadn't felt as comfortable in the locker room because of those players. So I would assume that one of them stays, right? That Daniel is going to stay because he's the best player on the Earthquakes this season, hands down. But they have 3 players who are up for renewal, which is Judson, Nathan, and Rodriguez. My assumption is that one of them stays, if only because they are a tight-knit group in the locker room, and to break them all up like that would kind of be bad mojo. That's my guess. There's lots of reasons to keep Rodriguez. That is one of them. So I think it's pretty much a lock that they keep Rodriguez at this point.
The good news is with Nathan
or Judson, my instinct would be no. My instinct would be Nathan in 2022 was not a good center back partner for Rodriguez. They both play too aggressively together. That doesn't work well. My instinct would be not to bring back Judson either, because I think he's past his prime. I think he has been for a few years now. With that said, if there is one reason to keep one of them around, it would be to keep that core group of players who like each other so much together. So that is working in their favor. I don't know if that's enough to justify bringing back Nathan or Judson. Do you think there's any argument, Jamin, for bringing back either of those 2 players?
The argument for bringing back Judson is he's on a much more attractive contract than he was before. I'm not even sure. Let me just see kind of what we got here. He's not a TAM player. He's in effect he's a senior roster player, but it's not a large contract. And I think the salary budget chart, the salary budget on him, or base salary, I should say, is $250,000. So it's not an expensive contract from that perspective. And what you have to think about is what quality can you get in a similar price range for a defensive midfielder. And if you let him go, then you kind of commit yourself to having to put resources in to be able to sign another defensive midfielder. And either you decide, hey, one of these guys from Quakes 2, homegrowns who've been playing down there, is ready to step up, like a Cam Silly or something like that. But you have to kind of make decisions in terms of like who becomes the backup defensive midfielder, because we know Guerrezo is going to probably get called in for national team duty from time to time and probably pick up enough yellows to have a suspension here or there. So you kind of have to plan for a backup defensive midfielder.
Jamin, the name who's kind of, conspicuously missing from these conversations is Michael Baldissimo, because he was signed at the beginning of the season to be that player, to be a backup central midfielder. And he got
He's not 6.
solid minutes in those first few games of the season. He was playing in the home opener. He was playing in the first few games, and then he completely dropped off the radar altogether. So I don't know what his contract situation is, but I would assume that he is also up for renewal. I would assume that they signed him on a 1-year deal. Is that right?
He's a homegrown. So he's on a homegrown contract, which makes him more attractive to be able to keep because they were able to retain that. He also doesn't require an international slot because he is a homegrown. And so,
Right,
that makes his base. I'm just kind of finding his base contract. His base salary is a little bit over 85,000. So it's
but if he's nowhere near the starting 11, which he's clearly not, then
no, I don't think he is right now.
I would say that they should. I would say that given you have 2 of them, I would say you can move both of them off the books and then use that money to get an upgrade, right? With the 85,000 from Baldissimo and the 225,000 from Judson, you can pool that together to get a slight upgrade in that position and then free up another roster spot for somebody else. And I think that would leave them with more than enough depth in midfield. They already have Grueso, Jackson Ewell, they have Jack Skane, they have Nico Shakiris, they have Jamir Montero or another midfielder in there that they'll sign. I think they have enough depth in there to be able to consolidate both of those players into one position.
I think Jack Skane needs a new contract. So
he needs a new contract. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah,
give Jack Skane a new contract.
Pretty sure he's
deserves his
last
money.
option year
I'm
as
sorry.
a draft pick.
They need to give him his money. Jack Skane deserves at least a $300,000 deal in my books. He was the single most exciting player on the Earthquakes team in the latter half of the season. And one of the things that we talked to Luchi Gonzalez about in our exclusive interview with him was the identity that he wants to help form in this team. And I was asking him, you have defensive structure, right? The defensive structure was the big year 1 project, and they achieved that. They no longer allowed 69 goals. Part of that is Daniel. Part of that is because they actually have an organized way of playing defense now. But what do they do next season? Because it wasn't clear what their kind of attacking identity was. They counterattacked sometimes. Sometimes they possessed the ball. Sometimes they played 2-5-2. Sometimes they played 4-2-3-1. But in possession, they didn't really have one coherent identity that they stuck with. They did everything a little bit. They did all of it kind of mediocre. They didn't do anything really well, and ultimately that wasn't good enough for a 7th place spot. That's why they settled for 9th. It's because they couldn't figure out how they wanted to play going forward. And the thing that Luchi said, the word that Luchi kept coming back to, and it's kind of Greg Berhalter speak. It's a little vague. It doesn't give you an exact answer. He wasn't as clear as saying we are going to play directly through the middle, and that's how we're going to score goals. He wasn't saying we are going to press high. He said they wanted to create pressure in lots of different areas of the field. And, pressure can mean a lot of different things. It can mean pressing high. It can mean sitting in a low block and, double teaming and overwhelming people with numbers. It can mean a lot of different things. But I will say that the one person who kind of personifies pressure on this team is Jack Skane. And he's the guy who is constantly running at players, who's constantly creating, who's constantly moving the ball forward. He is putting teams under pressure. And for that reason, I think he is one of the guys that you need to build around in this central midfield. And he deserves this roster spot. So yeah. If you talk to me about the midfield, because I think it's pretty clear that for the roster building project, 2 big areas to focus on are the midfield and the left wing. And in the midfield, I think as we've just said, you keep Shakiris, you keep Ewell, you keep Grueso, and you keep Skane. That's 4 players, and then you get a big DP number 10. And the guys that you let go are Baldissimo, you let go of Judson, and you let go of Jamir Montero. And I think that will give you enough resources to go and get that big number 10 that you need, and maybe another backup as well.
And depending upon the price for Nathan as well, I think you need to decide if that makes sense. Okay, so let's get into maybe a few of these questions, Alex. Phil starts us off. He says he'd like to hear your takes on Benji Kikanovic. Now, we learned from Tom Bogert the other day that Benji signed a new deal. And based upon the information I've been able to glean on this, it was actually signed quite some time ago and was not announced. And part of that was because he was going through injuries and such at the time. And then he was due to come back and then it got another injury. So it just kept kind of getting punted down the road. But it probably would have gotten revealed, if not by Bogert at the time that the contract announcements and everything, the roster decisions were made. Sometimes we hear about new deals that happen when those roster announcements are made. Maybe that's when we'll hear about Paul Marie as well, or maybe even a Jack Skanes. So, we'll see kind of what happens between now and December 1st. But Benji Kikanovic, tough last season, really good, really impressive. We were talking about Benji 2 years ago, like we're talking about Jack Skanes now, the guy that kind of, would push that back line and be able to make things happen when it felt like nothing else was happening on the pitch. Last year seemed to be a bit injury bit. And then maybe that affected his performance, his groove. Maybe he just had an off year. That happens a lot with wingers in MLS. What's your take right now on Benji Kikanovic, and how does the Matthew Hoppe situation? Sounded like maybe Matthew Hoppe on his Instagram was saying goodbye. Kind of unclear.
I don't read too much into the Instagram.
What's your take on Benji Kikanovic at this point, Alex?
I don't know what the future holds for Benji Kikanovic. A part of me is skeptical that he is going to find success in San Jose. I think he very clearly got off on the wrong foot with Luchi Gonzalez. I think all parties would probably admit to that. I think that the Quakes handled his situation poorly, and the offer that he got from Athens poorly, and that partly contributed to some of the tension. I think he reacted to that poorly, is my understanding. So
I got a new contract. So apparently the noise helped him get a new contract because he didn't get moved.
It started the season poorly, but I can understand his contract before was meager, and we can go back to the 2022 salaries here, but I think he was one of the lower paid players on the schedule. He's making $91,000 a year. So he was paid, given his contributions in 2022, and the fact that he was one of the top goal scorers and he was one of the brightest players in the same way Jack Skanes was this season. He deserved a salary raise there, because that was a bad deal that he was on. And, even now, I think he's, worth more than that, even after a quiet season from him. So I'm glad that they gave him that new salary. I don't know if there's still an opportunity for him to succeed here with Luchi Gonzalez. He very clearly was not on the same wavelength as Luchi this season, and I wouldn't be surprised if they still try to move him this offseason. I don't think that's out of the picture. Even with a new contract, I don't think it's out of the picture that other clubs come calling for him. I know last season he impressed a lot of people. And maybe part of the reason the Quakes won up that deal was so that they could get a better transfer value for him, so they didn't risk losing him as a free agent. So that is, I would say that would make more sense for me than offering him a new contract, because they see him as being the solution at left wing. I think it's pretty clear that that's not the trajectory that he's on.
Yeah, he may not be. It's possible that they're going to see him as more of a backup nine, and so we'll see.
I'd be happy with that. I'd be happy with him as the backup nine. I think I don't know, Jamin. Can you remind me what the Ayo Akinola contract situation is? Because he was on $700,000, and that's definitely not worth keeping. And so if you move Akinola and you put Benji as the backup nine, and he's looked comfortable there when he's played before, I think that's a great place for Benji to land. If he decides he wants to stay in San Jose and give it another shot with Luchi, I think that probably makes sense, because he has a similar profile, I think, to Jeremy Ebobisse. And as we saw this season, Jeremy Ebobisse can't go 90 minutes for 34 games a year and continue to score goals. He needs options up top, and Benji Kikanovic could be one of them.
So Ayo Akinola, his contract is through 2024, but remember, he's a loan, so his contract is actually with Toronto FC. And he also has the benefit of a U22 designation, as does Matthew Hoppe, by the way. They both are from a salary cap level. They filled in the final 2 U22 spots that the Quakes had, which meant against the cap, they were only $150,000. However, that, on the actual salary, and not the salary, but the actual budget of the club is paying out these loans to the tune of $700,000 or whatever it is. So I think that element of it is a bit kind of problematic, because that takes money away from potentially an upgrade, let's say at the left wing position, or an upgrade at Jamiro Montero's position.
Look, Jim, just because somebody's on a homegrown deal or on U22 doesn't mean they're worth keeping around. I feel like so often,
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just pointing out that the loan value is, the loan cost is much higher than the actual cap hit. I'm just pointing it out. So
I think whatever the financials are, it just doesn't make sense to keep him around if he's not going to be scratching the starting lineup. And I think it's pretty clear that he's not going to be. I would much. I think our biggest point of contention, Jamin, is Matthew Hoppe. I think that Matthew Hoppe is 1,000% a player that you want to keep around next season. He was a guy who brought fire. He was a guy who brought goals at key moments. And I think,
as a DP, if that Middlesbrough cost is too high, because it might.
I don't think you bring him down as a DP. But I think a shrewd negotiator could get him on a TAM level deal, and I think a TAM level deal would 1,000% be worth it.
I think it's built into the contract. Leach indicated that these buyout clauses are hard. There's not negotiation on them, and I think the Middlesbrough buyout is much too high for what his value is.
You think there's no way to bring him back on a TAM level deal?
No, I don't think so. I think it's much too high. I think even on TAM he's too high. I wouldn't pay TAM for him. You can get better players in the league for under $650,000 and pay a lot less. Can you get him as U22 and get him 150 cap it? Different question. But in terms of the total overall club budget, expenditure budget toward players, you can do much better than $650,000.
Okay, well, in that case, that adds more to Chris Leach's to-do list, because in that case, they're going to need a player who can fit that profile. I mean, maybe then this scenario here is, okay, you let Io go, you let Hoppe go, you have Benji, pegged as that backup number 9, and then you use all that Io and Hoppe money, and you get a true left winger and a true number 10. Maybe instead of having one player, Matthew Hoppe, who can kind of play a little bit of both, who likes to play centrally, you have a true left winger and a true number 10. If that's what they decide to do, I think I could live with that scenario, Jamin.
Okay.
I'm willing to give you that one. If they let Hoppe go and they don't sign a left winger and a number 10, then I'm going to be mad, because then you just let go of a bright young player who reasonably in 2-3 years you could resell to Europe for a nice big profit margin, and who is going to make this team better next season. So if they don't re-sign Hoppe, they need a very, very concrete plan to replace both that left wing position and that number 10 position. And I think
let me ask the question differently, and then let's get to Terry's question here. Would you re-sign him on a DP deal? Yes or no?
I think I would, if they weren't confident they could go out and get a left winger and a number 10.
Okay,
a DP left wing and a DP.
I would disagree that he's worth it. Terry says, do we sign a backup goalkeeper or hope Daniel doesn't get hurt? So basically, this is because of the JT Marcinkowski situation. People, who have seen, these injuries in other sports leagues and stuff, believe JT could be out all or most of at least next season. So do you go with Emmy as your backup and give the youngster a chance if Daniel does get hurt, or gets another red card, which I think he got 1 or 2 this season, and you give Emmy that chance to get MLS starts and use it to build experience? Or do you go get another backup keeper, and even one that once JT comes back is not going to be of value to you? Which one do you go with?
I really want to believe that Emmy is ready for that move, but I don't think he's there yet. I think from all of the people that I've spoken to and I've heard who regularly go to Quakes 2 games and watch Emmy, he's not ready to make that leap. And so I think the prudent thing to do would be to sign a backup MLS keeper, kind of a Matt Bersano type, who is gonna provide serviceable minutes if you need to call on them. I think that's the solution here. They're going to want 3 keepers on the roster anyways. It's not like they're going to just go in with 2 keepers. So they're going to fill another position anyways, and they might as well do it with someone who they're confident in. If it's the difference between $150,000 and $200,000 contract, I think that's worth it to sign somebody who you can have a little bit of confidence in.
Fans are saying that they would be happy with probably a goalkeeper through the draft. So you get somebody who's maybe physically developed and kind of like an Andrew Tarbell can be an understudy and get training directly from Aiden Brown, who's been known as being one of the best goalkeeper coaches in the league. And maybe you take a shot on a draft pick, and if they don't work out, they go to Quakes 2, and if that doesn't really work, then of course they probably would cut them after the first season or 2, whenever the contract would allow them to.
Yeah,
right.
I think the real solution here is just to have a personal bodyguard following Danielle at all times and making sure nobody's getting in within 6 feet of Danielle on the field, so that he doesn't get injured. They need to over insure those wrists and those arms and those legs that he's got, so that he stays healthy and they have the best goalkeeper in Major League Soccer.
Yeah, nervy times in that game against Sporting Kansas City there in the wild card, when he went down a couple times in that game, and we saw Emmy warming up. No offense to Emmy, but you thought your chances were low against Tim Melia in the penalties. Try without Daniel as well. So that would have been problematic.
Look, I still don't think it would matter, Jamin. I think that throwing Emmy Ochoa in there might have been, out of left field, and it might have been an element of surprise.
Just
that
don't let Jackson take the PK. Just don't let Jackson take the PK. That's all I said. Okay. Yeah, he only made 1 save. He didn't save 3 this time. All right. So Jackie says, does the league raise the cap and add a DP for Miami? So one thing for everyone to probably be aware of is there already is some raises built into the structure of the CBA. So I believe it's an 8%, raise depending upon different tiers and such. And also I believe they are reducing TAM year over year, and eventually are planning to phase out TAM and go completely to GAM. I think that's the plan. So basically the league is already, I think, raising the cap next year, 8%. Adding a DP for Miami, the answer is no. And, they're not any deal that they're going to do in Miami, that for DPs at this point is going to be something that'll come in on a TAM. So they will not be adding a DP for it. I know everyone's very, very concerned about this, but there's a lot of people watching this. It's not like it's just going to happen and Miami's going to hide it in the books like they did before. All right. How are we on the striker depth position? Are we good, or should we go and look for a striker? Alex, you spend money on a backup striker. You mentioned Hayo Akinola doesn't seem to be the answer. Let him go. Your other options are kind of, Benji, and let me just kind of think here because my mind's a little past the season already. Just look at
who else would kind of
fit that mold on the roster. Arsene Buddha.
No.
Anyone else that would kind of fit into that spot?
No. I'm fine with that spot going to Benji Akinovich. Jeremy Ebobisse is, I think a above average striker in Major League Soccer. He has consistently converted goals, especially when he's been given good service. I think, and I'm going to hammer home on this, they need a true DP left winger, and they need a true DP number 10. And they shouldn't go and get a bunch of mediocre players in every position. They should get 2 fantastic game changers in those positions, because that's where we're at this point, right? If there's one big takeaway from this season, is they have good structure. They don't need to reinvent the wheel next season. They just need game changers. They need players who are going to play directly, take the game by the scruff of the neck, put the ball in the back of the net, who are going to offer different goal threats other than Christian Espinosa and Jeremy Ebobisse. They need 2 guys who are going to make the difference, who are going to be able to drag them into, 4th or 5th place. And that needs to be a left winger and a number 10. And I think the number 10 job's easy. You have Jack Skane, who's ready to, I think, carry some of that weight. And you get Jamir Montero off the books and really get, a number 10, a creative number 10 who is direct, who likes to dribble, who likes to counterattack quickly, right? The problem with Jamir Montero, and I want to thank at this point Jamir Montero for the 2 seasons that he's had in San Jose, because I genuinely think he has been one of the more entertaining players to watch. He's been skillful. He's, I think especially last year was a really, really key part of this offense. He always works hard on defense, but he's a floater. He's a floater. He likes to play in the half spaces. He likes to press in weird angles at off times. And then he likes to sit on the ball and find these kind of counterintuitive passes. And Arturo is right. He doesn't fit the need. He doesn't fit the profile of the player that Luchi Gonzalez needs in that position. That was really obvious this season. It was holding the Quakes back. They need number 10, ready-made for Luchi Gonzalez's team. And so that's easy. The conversation that's not easy, Jamin, is what to do with Cade Cowell. Because you can say, go get a DP left winger, but does he then take Cade Cowell's place? My answer is an emphatic yes. I think that Cade Cowell would benefit from more competition there. He's better as a super sub anyways, and the Quakes can't bank on him for another season. He showed this season and last season that he is not the guy who's going to score 5 to 10 goals for you in that position. He didn't do that last season. He, in fact, 2022 got usurped by Benji Jukanovic in that position. 2023, he got usurped by Matthew Hoppe in that position. There's been 2 seasons in a row where Cade Cowell has fallen below expectations. And the question that I asked Chris Leach at the press conference, because this is really the first time that we were able to speak to him about why he rejected the Bologna offer, is why are you keeping him? What is the master plan for Cade Cowell? In my opinion, his growth would be better served at another club. He's played 100 games in Major League Soccer already. I don't think he has any more growing to do in San Jose. Everybody agreed. Chris Leach said it. Luchi Gonzalez said it. He has more to do. He has more things he needs to improve. He has a lot more growing to do before he can fulfill his potential. That is true. San Jose, I don't think, is the right place for him to continue to do that growth. I think it's gotten a little stale in San Jose for him. I think he's not got a good rhythm going. I think kind of changing that routine would serve him really well. Getting a new challenge with new expectations in Europe would be really good for him. And I think Chris Leach kind of admitted that, Jamin. He's willing to say a move could be good for Cade Cowell. Everybody knows at this point, nobody's deluding themselves that Cade Cowell has been very clear. He wants a move. At the beginning of the season, he said his goal was to get a summer move. He was targeting last summer for a move. I think that meant that they should have sold him to Bologna and taken the Bologna offer. Chris Leach disagrees. He was very adamant, more adamant than I've ever seen him, that was not a beneficial deal for the Quakes, and that the publicly reported information about a $3 million offer with up to $5 million in compensation. It's publicly reported by Tom Bogert, Jeff Carlisle. I have sources that confirm that, multiple sources, not just one place, that confirms kind of broadly that is the terms of the deal that they were offered.
Yeah, the offline
is very adamant that is not true.
Yeah, the offline emphasis was that it was a loan deal and it was not good for the club.
Yes, that's the offline emphasis. But I still think Chris Leach was kind of hinting that maybe they're looking for a move this winter, or that they all know that this move needs to happen.
Yeah, I think like the way that Chris, says things kind of gets in the way of what he means at times. And he said that, he's not opposed to, making moves of players outside the league. And honestly, like it, kind of would flip that. It would be like, we are looking for opportunities to move players because we know that's going to bring in the GAM that's going to allow us to be able to do more things. My opinion is that teams should turn over players regularly, even if they take some bad deals, because the flow of money and also showing your young players that are coming through, the academy players, that you will move your academy players and be able to get them into different areas, I think is key for the growth of the academy. Otherwise, you're just going to sign a bunch of homegrowns and they're going to sit there. So you have to be able to demonstrate that you can move players, and you have to create the space for new players coming through the academy system and turning into homegrowns and starting off at Quakes too, and then being able to make the move as soon as they're able to.
Look, I have the exact quote. The exact quote from Chris Leach is that a move for Cade would do him well, and we're open to that, but it has to be the right situation in the right time. I think if it's not this winter, it should be next summer. And I think the Quakes think they were very clear that the window is still open for him here, especially if he gets another national team appearance or two. But I think it's going to be hard for him to continue to get national team appearances, call-ups, if he's still in San Jose and if he's not scoring for San Jose. So I think everybody knows that they need to plan for him to move, and that means that starts this winter. That starts this winter with bringing in another DP left wing to kind of preemptively push him out the door and to get him to move to Europe that he wants. But
you're only giving one side of what Chris said. The other side of what Chris said is that the most important thing for a player his age is playing time, that you could do a player like him a disservice by moving him to a place where he's not going to get playing.
He's not getting playing time in San Jose.
He started answering the question, and then he gave what you said, which is, that he could also be enhanced by a move to somewhere else, but only if he's getting that playing time.
I don't buy that because the reason I don't buy that is because the reason they rejected the Bologna move is not because it wouldn't have been good for Cade. Cade wanted that move. His camp really clearly wanted that move.
They thought it was bad for the club.
They thought it was bad for the club, right? I think that was lip service. And I don't think I think that move would have been better for Cade at this point in his career. And look, he's not getting consistent playing time in San Jose either. They're in an ideal situation.
He wasn't performing, and they had a better option.
He'd be a super sub, right? I don't see that as a convincing reason to keep him in San Jose because he's getting playing time. He's had 100 appearances in Major League Soccer. He doesn't need more playing time. He needs a different challenge at this stage in his career. And so, Akash's right. They gave Cade plenty of playing time here. It's not the playing time that's an issue with Cade. And so, that's Chris Leach has quite the bucket list here, the to-do list this winter. Jamin, I think there's a lot of pressure on him to get it right. This is year 2 for Luchi Gonzalez, and there's pressure on them to improve on this season's result. In order to do that, it's about giving Luchi the players he needs to succeed and setting up this roster for success. So I think this is going to be one of the kind of defining windows in Chris Leach's tenure as a San Jose Earthquakes general manager. And I think that this is a really, really critical window for him to prove his general manager chops.
Oh, and he offered you a personal conversation to talk to you about the Cade transfer, numbers and things like that. It sounds like. Okay. So, and publicly he said that. Okay. I've seen something about Maxi Urruti to the Quakes. I'm not high on that. What do you think? It's actually been debunked. This is a fake rumor. Is it true that Maxi Urruti had a picture on his Instagram, I think it was, that showed earthquakes at the very top with him, like with arrows, and I guess a bow or whatever, looking like he's a hunter and he's hunting the earthquakes or something like that? It was actually just a poor choice of background that he put into there. It had nothing to do with any sort of actual transfer move potential to the Quakes or anything like that. In fact, at this point in the offseason, clubs are not even allowed to talk to players at this time. There's a schedule for all these things that indicates, when clubs can begin conversations with players who are out of contract and things like that. So no, Maxi Urruti is not coming.
They don't need a player who's only once scored more than 10 goals in a decade-long.
Maxi Urruti
scored one last season. It doesn't make any sense.
He's got one of the worst conversion rates of any striker in the history of the league. He had one good season, and every other season he's been poor. So that shows you a little bit about, kind of like sometimes, players get that magic and then all of a sudden, like, it goes back out again. So that's what's happening with Maxi Urruti. No, I don't. I think he's not a good player. Benji greater than Urruti. I agree with Philip Leva. Okay. All right. So, and Crystal agrees.
Well, Jamin, okay. The questions, you're ignoring some comments here, Jamin. You're conveniently ignoring the comments asking about a Chicharito move to San Jose. Is that because you're not taking those seriously?
No. Why would I take that seriously?
Well, there have been
not a serious comment.
There have been many
rumor.
Many a Twitter user here that's been saying he could end up at a club like San Jose or a club like Austin or
so what? It's a Twitter user. Like anyone can say anything. It's not a real rumor.
So you don't think he'd be a good fit if theoretically he were on the table, and why is that?
No, because they don't need a poacher style player right now. They need a player who can actually get much more engaged into the offense of the team than what Chicharito is able to do at his particular age. The answer is no. I don't think he would be good for this team at all. If you're concerned about, the people who raise this are people who are concerned about Jeremy Ebobisse, I got news for you. Chicharito's below Jeremy Ebobisse's level at this point in his career. He's going to be injured in over half the games, and you're going to pay a lot of money that you could have been paying for a high quality 10 or high quality left wing and dumping it into a position where you already got a very good player. Absolutely zero reason to do that. So I know people think like, oh, Jibo went from 17 goals to 10 goals. I've already said on the Soccer Hour with Ted Ramey this week why that was. His conversion rate this year is the same as last year, 16%. 16% is a good conversion rate for a striker. This has everything to do with service. He's only getting it from one place. We all know who that place is. He needs to start getting it from more places, and Jibo will be fine.
Jamin knows the way. All right, Jamin.
Okay.
If you say no Chicharito, I'll have to.
No Chicharito.
I'll have to.
All right, let's find another. You got another question that you're seeing that you want to talk about? I'm scrolling, so there's probably more questions. I just need to. Why didn't Buddha get a shot given his performances with Quakes 2? Yeah, Aseni Buddha, very good, particularly end of the season at Quakes 2. Do you think he should be given more a shot with the first team next season, Alex?
No, I've never seen anything from Buddha with the first team that indicates that he's going to be a guy breaking into the lineup. What I've tended to see is kind of a few performances where he looks lost and defensively out of whack. And I don't know if he's ready to make the jump. I think that, there might just be guys who will be, ringers for Q2, but not quite ready to play for the first team and kind of get caught in between there. And he seems like the kind of player who's been caught in between here. I wouldn't count on it. If for some reason he has a major breakthrough and, Luchi Gonzalez is willing to give him a roster spot and he gets, on the bench and makes a substitute appearance, I'd love for that to happen. But I just don't think that he's shown that with the first team yet, that form that he's had with the second team.
Yeah, and I would say that preseason is his time. If he comes in with a really strong preseason and shows what he's capable of, such as Nico Shakiris did, such as Jack Skane did, but both of them unfortunately both went through some injuries and things like that pushed out both of them getting onto the field until later in the season. He needs to be able to show in preseason that he can step ahead of somebody else to be able to get that opportunity to be like a backup 9. One of the I think the issues here is also that Christian Espinoza is such a lock at the right wing position that players who could be good right wingers, and I would put Buddha into that category. I would put even Cade, who could be better on the right side, into that category. The problem is not good enough to unseat Christian Espinoza. So a lot of those types of players get slotted into other places because Christian is so strong on the right. So, Aseni Buddha, might need to wait a bit for his opportunity, or, knock on wood, anything happens with Christian Espinoza, with an injury or anything like that, maybe a player like Buda would get an opportunity, on the right to be able to show what he can do. Or maybe even Cade Cowell would have a chance to move over there and be able to show more on the right side where people have claimed that he's more comfortable. But at the moment with Christian Espinoza so strong, no one's going to make that move. And frankly, almost haven't needed a backup right wing for the last 2-3 years.
The other place where I feel good about the San Jose Earthquakes, for the first time in forever, Jamin. You know what we haven't, the two positions we haven't talked about at all on this show?
Defensive midfielder?
I wish. No, it's right back and left back, Jamin.
Oh, right back and left back.
I don't know if you remember, Jamin. Back in
talking about 6 for the longest time, but
2020, that was their Achilles heel. They never had, after Jordan Stewart left, there was 5 years where they had no adequate replacements. Now, they're right here. They have two good options, Marie, Trauco, and on the other side of Capo, and they don't have to worry. Those are three guys who are, they're not old. They have a lot of legs left in them, and they're defensively solid and, offensively dangerous. And they have a good balance between the three of them. They cover most skill sets you'd want and need. And I think fullback is a position where, as long as you're re-signing Paul Marie, seems like he's happy, he's getting good minutes, and he's making an impact, then you can just check that one off and move forward next season confident in that position. You have any concern about that at all, Jamin?
Nope. I like those three players, and I hope that the Quakes keep those three players for a while. The one thing just to kind of watch with Trauco is he is getting now in that declining part of his career. And of course, his time at the national team, a lot of that's now going to Marcos Lopez, who obviously we all know as well. And so it is something to kind of watch. Like, I do think that there's a point at which over the next year or two, Paul Marie might be the better regular option. And it might be that Carlos Carrezo could be the backup that can fill in, when necessary. If a Capo's out, Paul moves over to the right, Trauco fills in on the left. But Paul Marie, might be able to lock down the starting job, and it would be deserved, and it wouldn't surprise me if it happened, and I'm okay with that. Play the hot hand. That's the way I kind of look at it. Whoever is looking the best in practice and in games, between those three, you can play them in various combinations.
100% right, Jamin. So Jamin, I think we pretty comprehensively walked through in a roundabout way. We've walked through the full lineup now. I want to get back to this big picture question before we wrap here, Jamin.
Okay, big picture.
Colin Johnson here is perfectly teed this up for us. Are there certain formations, style of play, or positions that are required to be more successful in MLS? Do the Quakes have that fit at all? I think this question is good because it gets at kind of the bigger picture question about San Jose's identity and the direction that they're heading in. And that's kind of where we started the conversation. I want to bring it back there. San Jose have defensive structure. They've checked that box. What do you think they need to get that attacking, menace, prowess, and take their offense to the next level? Luchi Gonzalez was talking a little about pressure. If you subscribe to the Patreon, you get access to that exclusive interview. You can hear his thoughts on that question. But Jamin, I want to get your thoughts on that question. What do you think they need?
Well, so Luci's answer to us was they adapt the way that they're intending to attack based upon where they want to bring pressure against the opponent. So if they want to bring high pressure, they want to pressure the goalkeeper, they want to pressure deep up the field, pressure the center backs, pressure the outside backs on the outlet pass, whatever the case is. What's important is that they have people who are willing to both put in the defensive work as well as are able, if they win the ball up high, to immediately turn that into an opportunity where the defense is scrambling and is not set, and hopefully you have a numeric advantage. And that's what we kind of learned from Luchi, and that he's kind of formation agnostic. He mentioned like 6 different formations that they played this season when you asked him that question, Alex. And again, pointing people toward the Patreon video that we took. Your first question, Alex, I think kind of got into this, and he was able to really talk about that kind of style. So from that perspective, then it's important that they identify the players who are going to work well in that press and then be able to attack quickly when the ball is won. We know that, Christian Espinoza, very good at that. We know that Jamiro Montero is a good presser, but he tends to get lost in terms of where to take the ball when it's lost. Jackson Ewell, in the right situation, can play progressively, and he's gotten better defensively. Cade Cowell looks lost when he presses to me. And a lot of people have mentioned that one of the issues with Bobasi is that he's dropping too deep. So for me, one of the things that you have to solve is what is that central midfield that you need to have, and that includes the Montero Ewell question. And if you're replacing Montero, which they probably are, getting the player who can help you press, but also be able to know exactly what to do when that ball gets turned over and take the pressure off of a Bobasi so he doesn't have to drop deep. He can stay higher. I think that that's very key. Also finding the right left wing, and I don't think it's Cade, but finding the right left wing. It could be Benji if he's fully healthy. But you have to figure out who is that left wing that can provide that kind of press. One of the pluses with Jack Skane is that he's actually a really good presser. And when Lucci's brought him in toward the end of the game, quite often it's because he's wanting him to actually not just be able to drive at the back line, but he's also expecting that he's going to chase balls and pressure people. So if you turn Jack Skane into a starter at either that's in a central midfield spot or at that left wing, he might have what you need in order to both press, win the ball, and then be able to go forward. So that's the problem that I think is really important to solve in this offseason, given the response that we got from Luchi Gonzalez directly about what he thinks is the most important aspect of their style is really how they press, and they do that selectively differently against different teams so they're not predictable.
And I think, Jamin, if there's one thing that I want to see more of, I want to see more direct play through the middle. At the beginning of the season, look at the LAFC win. You look at some of those early games when they were able to get the ball, the early ball, to Christian Espinosa or Bobasi, get a layoff, and then switch the field, get runs in behind. They look so dangerous. They were able to do that a little bit more in the second half of the season when they switched to a 3-5-2, and you had Jack Skane in there. The game against RSL in particular, they were playing direct that way. I think that's when they looked the best, when they moved the ball quickly up the middle, directly forward. And I think it entirely depends on having a number 10 who can pick up the ball, turn it around, and find the right pass going forward. I think in RSL, Diego Luna does that for them incredibly well. I think they need a player in that profile. They don't need somebody who is gonna press as hard as Jack Skane. They don't need somebody who's gonna be able to hit a long ball like Jackson Ewell. They need somebody who can get the ball under pressure, turn and find a pass going forward, connect the ball forward, take a few steps on the dribble, and then play a pass going forward. They need somebody who can drive with the ball, who can move with the ball going forward, and if they can have that, then they can play much more directly. And I think that's one of the most, I think, the easiest avenue through which they can get this offense scoring. That's the direction I see this offense going, this club going. I'd be a little concerned if they were signing players in the winter transfer window who didn't fit that profile.
Yeah. And also too, I think it's important that they get players who have that tactical flexibility that can change around formations. One of the problems I've always felt with Almeida is that he kind of forced everyone into a particular mold in terms of what he could play. And it was very difficult for him to change formations and be able to keep his defensive approach.
What do you mean? Jackson Ewell at center back, Jamin? That was
great. Yeah. So, again, Lucci is saying, hey, we play what fits into the particular situation. Sometimes we're going to play 3-5-2. Sometimes we'll play 4-3-3. Sometimes, we'll play, a 4-2-3-1. And so these different combinations and all the different formations that he listed off, if you want to go hear him again, go to the Patreon link to be able to watch the video. But all those formations he listed off, he says, are in service of how do they want to press and how do they want to attack once they win the ball, where they want to be able to put that type of pressure. So for me, it's important to retain that tactical flexibility, because no matter what what formation you pick, when it's predictable, the other team knows what you're going to try to do. That's when it gets problematic. And the Quakes did get predictable at times in this season. And when they looked their best was when they changed things up, when they were actively looking to be less predictable, change up the formation, change up some of the pressing things. Don't assume because you win a certain way means you should come out and play the same way the next game with the same set of players. You have to be able to adapt quickly. One of the things that Ben Olsen got a lot of credit for with Houston this season is that he played to the opponent. He basically would change up their tactical approach every game based upon the opponent. So no one knew how Houston was going to play, and Houston would use everyone else's schemes kind of against them because they weren't predictable, and they found predictability elements in their opponents. I like that approach.
You're talking about Houston in the past tense. Their season is not over.
They're still going
all the way.
They might be an MLS Cup for all we know at this point. So, but I think that's the important point for me is to retain that tactical flexibility.
Jan, I think that only works for Houston because they have a star video analyst in their technical team. Our dear friend Carlin Carpenter, who's here on the show.
Well, that's one of the reasons they're so good.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's all Carl. We'll give Carl a lot of the credit there. I agree with you. The flexibility is key. I think that they've already shown good flexibility. I'm not worried about that because I think that Luchi Gonzalez has shown a willingness to adapt, and we saw him change multiple times this season. And so I think you're right. They can lean into that, but I think that's already something that they kind of have built into Luchi Gonzalez's game model.
So Jim, not one particular formation is what I want to say. I want to have the ability to continuously be able to make changes depending upon the situations.
Jamin, the one question before we wrap here, questions about the jerseys. I think the Quakes are due for another home jersey next season. Is that right? They're due for a new kit.
No, it's the away jersey. They're going to turn over the away jersey, right?
Was the home jersey new this season? Am I losing my mind?
New this season. So the problem with the Clash design, and that was already pointed out, I think, by Crystal, is because the Clash kit was Nike, so they can't use that. But bring back some elements, some ideas from something like that. You got to have a lighter color kit, with like kind of the white and the yellowish, greenish color. Maybe there's something there. I remember that one of the reasons that they moved everyone to white kits was because of Second Spectrum needing to be able to have contrast between the player kits. They did change providers for tracking data this last season. I don't know if the new system is less sensitive, but it seemed like we saw a bit more color variation in the games this past year. So hopefully that's good for being able to get some interesting kits.
Yeah, I don't know. In retrospect, I appreciate the Second Spectrum in the work that they do, Jamin. Is it worth sacrificing the soccer kit culture for the soccer data analytics? I'm not sure that's a bet I'd continue to make. I need my nice retro jerseys that I can wear in 20 years, Jamin. Yeah,
well, you can see I'm wearing American Soccer Analysis tonight, so you know where I lean in terms of those types of things. Jack Price, released by Colorado, how bad is his injury? Jack Price is one of the best set piece takers this league has ever seen, but he's a statue. So I think it's bad enough that he seems pretty immobile. Won't be surprised if he actually ends up retiring. All right, Jamin. Well, it's been a great evening. I appreciate everyone great question from the jumping on with us here. Before we wrap, send everyone, of course, back to the Patreon. And Edgar saying, hold another episode. We mentioned at the beginning, Edgar, since there was a couple people who couldn't make it tonight, and one of them very last second, we did indicate that we may do a second show with a different group, and we'll just have to play that by ear and see what availability is, so we can get more people, thoughts from more people to be able to share with you. Yeah, we're hopefully looking to do that next weekend.
or shortly after that. But in the meantime, we want to refer everyone back to the Patreon with the exclusive interview we did with Luchi Gonzalez. Me, Robert, and Jamin sat down with him for 20 minutes on Wednesday. So that's available to all our patrons, $2 a month. In addition, we have some videos from the press conference that Chris Leach and Luchi had that day as well. And so all of their takeaways on the end of the season and their expectations heading into the off season will be there as well. We're also going to host a patron Zoom call very shortly, so we get to chat with all you guys, hear all of your fantastic analysis and opinions in the patron Zoom call, hopefully within the next few weeks as well, Jamin. So look out for that one as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the things that I did is I did drop the link to the press conference into the Slack already. I will, to avoid sending out too many emails today, I will send that one out to all the patrons as well tomorrow. It is a private link on YouTube, so you will only be able to get it by getting the link from us directly. But you can either find that in the Slack if you're already in the Slack, or I will also send it tomorrow to everyone on the patron list, so that you can check out all the press conference questions asked by Quakes Epicenter and the other people who are on the call, which included some national coverage from ESPN and The Athletic as well. So a good set of questions, and ones that you'll probably get some insight from.
Yeah. Appreciate everyone for joining. We'll see you next time.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your night. Take care. Thanks for joining the Aftershock tonight.